Oh my gosh, you guys! Oh my gosh, it is coming close, guys. Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!
Every year, Californians are excited to see the gray whales migrate as they go from Mexico up to Alaska for the summer, where they forage and gain all the weight that they need for this amazing long journey. However, this year, an increased number of those animals ended up dying and washing up on our beaches right here around the Bay Area. We're seeing the impacts that drastic and rapid climate change, especially in the ocean, can have on a certain species like the gray whale. Something is changing in their environment. The ocean has a fever and it's sick. This is a story about climate change and the ice melting in the Arctic and the huge changes that are happening in the ocean.
We have had multiple tours where we're going out like normal, searching for gray whales around the bay, looking out for the spouts of how we find them. And instead of finding live gray whales, we have actually found dead gray whales in the bay. All the guests get very excited at first because they think that we have found a whale. But then once we realize that this animal is unfortunately deceased, it turns the tide on the whole tour. The second gray whale that we did find on one of our tours that was deceased was very bloated and floating at the surface. I did manage to get a photo of this animal with lots of seabirds around it, kind of on its side. From the size of the animal that we saw, it was most likely a calf or a yearling, so it was very young. The majority of the animals that we have seen pass away this year have been younger gray whales, calves and yearlings that are just starting out their life and not finding enough food. We explained to the guests that there are multiple reasons why this animal could have passed away. The number one reason we've seen this year is malnutrition. They're very underweight, they're starving and not finding enough food. The other reason are the ship strikes, so getting hit by a large ship and not surviving from that wound.
The animal that washed up on Ocean Beach is a very public beach right there in San Francisco. And that was unfortunately an adult whale that was malnourished but also had got struck by a ship. It takes time for them to lose weight, and so that was probably the primary reason why that animal was close to shore and was not feeling well, potentially couldn't get out of the way of a ship. This is definitely an increase in the number of ship strikes that we've seen in the gray whales, so there's something that's changing probably their behavior. We've had 13 necropsies that we've performed this year. The most recent one was a small calf that was on Limantor Beach. The animal had no blubber, so it obviously had not been getting milk from its mom for a long period of time.
The San Francisco Bay is incredibly unique because it is an estuary. It's a place where we have the ocean and the freshwater rivers meeting and mixing. And this creates a very unique habitat to find these whales.
This is one of the most productive spots on the entire planet. It experiences something called coastal upwelling, and that means that we get primary productivity with phytoplankton, which are tiny little ocean plants, zooplankton, which are little ocean animals that feed on them, all the way up to this scale of a blue whale. The gray whales are the only bottom-feeding whale in the entire planet, and what they'll do is each gray whale dives down to the ocean floor. They're usually fairly shallow waters, turn on their right side, take a huge gulp of mud and organisms, spit out the silt, and then swallow the good food.
The marine mammals are the top consumers of the ocean, and there has to be a whole cascade that happens in the food web in order for them to thrive. Whenever these top predators or consumers are having a hard time finding enough food, they're an indicator to us that there's a problem. With the gray whales, these whales are malnourished, they're skinny, they didn't get enough food last summer when they were in Alaska, and they're basically starving to death. And for us, that is an alarm that, hey, what's happening that this species is not thriving? And we have to look to where they eat.
Some of the hotspots for whales feeding in the Arctic are places at the edge of the ice. The plankton grow underneath the edge of the ice shelf. If the ice has retreated, the whales have further to go, or they may have shifted and they're feeding on something else, which may have less calories, may not have exactly the right nutrients.
Their hunger has driven them into an area that is no longer safe to be. The gray whales that would be migrating north during the springtime have suddenly taken a detour, and instead of going through our sanctuary waters, which are relatively safe, they're now detouring into San Francisco Bay. And unfortunately, that is bringing them into a collision course with the many ships that are also using these very same waters, all of whom are squeezing through an incredibly small area when they go through the Golden Gate Straits.
One of the programs and collaborations that we should be really proud of is the effort to reduce the number of whales hit by ships. We know from collecting data on whales that have been hit by ships that if a ship is going less than 10 knots, whales rarely get killed. We think what's happening is the whales have time to hear the ship and get out of the way.
We crafted this program with the marine sanctuaries and with other agencies in the shipping community to slow down very large ships, 300 gross tons or larger, when they're in these specific shipping channels. So instead of going at 15 to 20 knots, they're going down to 10 knots.
It's voluntary, there was no legislation passed, but it just has really reduced the number of whales being hit by ships.
It's difficult working at a facility like ours where we see pain and suffering all day long. It isn't just the whales, but it's a lot of the marine mammals. We have to think of the ocean as essential to life on Earth. It's a call for all of us to prevent and slow down the climate change that is happening.
As scientists, we generate facts. So our role is to make that information accessible to policymakers and managers and businessmen. Those people have the ability to make change.
We can't stop commerce altogether. We can simply work with commerce to help make them partners in having a better bay and, by extension, a better world for all of us.
What gives me hope is honestly the guests' faces when we see live whales. Small children getting to come out and see these animals for the first time in the wild doing completely natural behaviors. Really puts that momentum behind people to want to protect these animals, not just for us, but for those future generations.